Ahoy, and welcome to Blades and Banners. I've gone extra piratey for this episode because this may be, if I'm calculating right, the last campaign prep episode before we begin dropping official campaign episodes. We've had two excellent recording sessions. I'm really excited for you guys to start seeing what these players have created for this game. I think it's going to be really, really fun. And they've established some really interesting story elements for me to play with in creating their characters. I also want to just say these. I hope these campaign prep videos have been interesting to you. They've been really, really useful to me. In doing them, I've discovered a whole bunch of things that I was kind of off on in the way that I was preparing the game to run. For example, in earlier episode, I think when I did the Lazar Primer, I introduced Jorge the Black and the Iron Tide Principality as the previous ruling faction of the Lazar Principalities. And then later along the way, I introduced this Stormclaw Principality as the previous dominant faction in the Ninebay region, which is where our story is starting. And in doing so, I realized that was really silly. Why was I putting the big mystery of what became of the last High Prince way off in a corner of the principalities instead of right in the middle of where my player characters are? So I'm moving that and making Jorge the Black leader of the Stormclaw Principality. Like, just saying these things out loud has been a really big help of using you as a sounding board for the ideas as they have been developing. So whether you've been watching or not, you've been helpful in that. So thanks for listening or not listening. I don't know. Thanks for being an invisible sounding board. It's been handy. But today we are going to have a final primer episode where we're going to talk about our starting setting. So one of the things that worked really well about Kyber Shards was it had an extremely contained setting. It was set entirely in Stormreach. And if you listen to Eberron Renewed, which is the podcast where Eric runs and I'm a player, our previous campaign was also contained in the city of Sharn. And both of those campaigns I really liked because of the limited scope and the consistent group of NPCs that we got to interact with. With this campaign, I lose that. Lazar Principalities is a huge area with lots and lots of islands and many, many NPCs to interact with. And so what I'm doing for the starting point is we're going to begin in a more contained portion of the Lazar Principalities. And I'm kind of approaching this in the way that we think about the tiers of play, of first through fifth level being kind of tier one of play before things really start to kick off. And so I've been developing a comparatively safe setting for my characters to start off in this pseudo sandbox campaign that I'm now about to start running, or that I've now started running. And so today I want to introduce you to that, because unlike Stormreach, there's not a whole lot written about the Lazar Principalities. They show up in several adventures, they feature in all the source books, but in terms of just details, they are, well, we're kind of lacking. So I have created a lot. So we're going to start in what I'm calling the Ninebay region, or the Middle Isles. And I've created a map of that zoomed in using Incarnate. And here it is. So you can see that this region consists of 4 isles. There's the long, skinny isle of Ninebay, and then there are 4 islands around it. There's Speartip to the north, Seventh to the south, and then Thrug and Redwatch off to the east of the island. This is just across Far Strait from the mainland. The Dreadhold is nearby. And just north of Speartip is Greentarn, which is the seat of High Prince Ryger. So this is kind of the center portion of the principalities. My players picked this as their starting point. They, in fact, specifically picked 7th as their starting point. And so I've had them start developing different pieces of information about 7th, what its prince is like, what its natural resources are like, and then in game, we'll also develop some things about the principality that rules 7th, which they have named the Coral Fang Principality. So I have created some history of this region, as well as using some of the established lore to flesh out this part of the area, which is where our story is going to start, and where probably the first few adventures, depending on decisions the players make, will focus. So this is our starter zone, so to speak. Without further ado, here's just a primer on the Ninebay region. Ninebay Island is often called the flagship and was at the center of the reigning Stormclaw Principality during the time of High Prince Jorge the Black. Its strategic position in the midst of the Isles allowed him to control major shipping lanes, and it was from here that he forced the Northern Isles into submission. When Jorge died 20 years ago, the Stormclaw Principality collapsed into a mass of warring sea lords. While Rhaegar Irwinarn secured his position as High Prince, the Sea Lords of Ninebay, Thrug, Redwatch, and 7th fought for the scraps of Jorge's seat of power. The conflict wound on inconclusively until Rhaegar forced a general peace with his accession as High Prince. For Rhaegar to take Ninebay for himself would anger too many princes, but neither was there a claimant Rhaegar could trust enough to hand such a substantial prize. As a result, Ninebay remains a part of no principality. Its larger ports are ruled by local sea lords. Rhaegar took the northmost escort isle, Speartip, for himself, and allowed the sea lords of Thrug, Redwatch, and 7th to establish themselves as independent principalities. Many mysteries remain 20 years on from the fall of the Stormclaw Principality. What exactly became of Jorge the Black? And was the explosion aboard his flagship truly an accident? Jorge amassed vast wealth in his time, and some of it is widely believed to be stored in buried hoards across the hills and mountains of Ninebay and the surrounding isles. Within a year of Jorge's death, the Gauntlet, the strait that runs along the east side of Ninebay, became increasingly dangerous, not due to piracy, but rather due to an unknown creature that began attacking ships seemingly at random. No survivor has ever been able to describe the attacker, and it is locally known as the Ghost in the Gauntlet. Why did the creature not trouble the area during Jorge's reign? And what exactly is it? In spite of the lasting uncertainty, the princes of Redwatch, Thrug, and 7th have achieved a wary peace, and their competition to control Ninebay is kept below the surface for now. 7th is ruled by Lesh Durga, a hobgoblin warlord who left Dargoon not long after Haruk's rise to power. She is an outsider, but has ruled for 20 years by adapting well to the chaotic traditions of the Isles. While the goblinoids who came with her from Dargoon remain close advisors, she has engaged the full population of 7th in her administration of the island. Her dreadnought-class warship, Khashtur, is one of the largest in the waters around Ninebay. 7th's Fernia Manifest Zone produces a number of useful goods to export, including a hardy and fire-resistant tree called Scorchwood, and an elementally infused crystal called Ember Shards. Southwest of 7th is the major island of Thrug, dominated by the central wooded plateau on which the chief stronghold of Ironcliff, seat of Prince Zarath Ulur of the Karath-Tar Principality. Prince Zarath hopes the island can become a new home for orcs displaced by the fighting of the Mror holds, and leverages the island's rich cold iron deposits to build wealth for that purpose. Many orc warriors have relocated to Thrug, giving Zarath a disciplined fighting force should he need it, and his fleet of 3 ships makes the Karath-Tar Principality a formidable presence in the local waters. Eastmost is the island of Redwatch, home of the Riptide Principality. The island has been ruled by the Ashford family time out of mind, and they have great influence in the region. They are bitter opponents of the Coral Fang Principality and Durga. Publicly, the Ashfords claim Durga was responsible for the death of Jorge in order to secure her position on 7th, and privately they believe Prince Rhaegar helped her do it. But for now, they bide their time. The Riptide Principality is a mercantile faction. Their fleet primarily protects their shipping interests, though it is an open secret that their true export is secrets. Redwatch is also the center of trade for an illicit drug called Visionary, a hallucinogenic that supposedly grants limited prescience to the user. The Riptide Principality also boasts 3 ships, though they are smaller and more lightly armed than their neighbors. Ninebay itself is a no man's land. Each port has its sea lord with their own agenda, and the interior has been largely allowed to return to wilderness, except for where mining and lumber interests attempt to stake claims. The legends of Jorge's wealth make it a popular destination for adventurers, and its strategic position makes it an object of the schemes of the nearby princes. So there you go. From a design perspective, that's the kind of thing that I would normally send to my players before we begin playing. I was still kind of in process with a lot of the ideas when we started recording because we needed to get going early. And honestly, between work and other things and just creativity hits when it hits in a lot of ways, some of these ideas came to me as a result of getting into play. Just like you get to know a character in play, you get to know a setting in play. And so a little bit of this is kind of brand new because of the way in which play influenced the decisions. So hopefully this document that I've written and that I've just shared with you is going to serve as the foundation for a really good starting area for the players to get into and a really good beginning point for this campaign to grow from. So my intention is definitely to visit all parts of the principalities. This is not going to just be a Ninebay centered campaign. As much as I liked the contained nature of Kyber Shards, this is a new campaign, and I want to tell a different kind of story, and the players are expecting a different kind of story. So I'm not just going to try to repeat that. They're going to have a ship, and that's going to give them a mobility that they didn't really have in Kyber Shards. So I'm pretty excited to build from this, but I'm also really happy to have developed a home base. I've got a lot of NPCs developed as Sea Lords and denizens of Ninebay. I've developed the core NPCs of the Coral Fang Principality, which is the one that the player characters will be serving on the island of Seventh under Lesh Durga. I've got pretty recently a better handle on the Riptide and Kereth Tar principalities of Redwatch and Thrug. And so the personalities of this area are pretty well developed. And that starting point will give me an idea of what the player characters are going to latch onto and will tell me what I need to work more on for down the road as the story grows beyond this regional politics to get into the national politics of the principalities as a whole. So that's kind of where my thinking is coming from and why I'm working on having this local region pretty well developed. I think that's a really strong way to start a campaign. I think a lot of times it's easy to feel like you have to build out a whole world or even a whole continent. But if you really look at early adventures in the way that they're designed or campaign settings in the way that they're designed, we tend to focus pretty local at the beginning because it makes a lot of sense just the way that the play works. I think one of the best starter box settings was the 4th edition setting of the Nintir Vale, because you had an implication of a bigger world out there, but it was kind of just left out there for you as a game master to develop, whereas the Nintir Vale was giving you a bunch of development so you could actually run adventures in it. But it was a relatively small region, a few hundred miles across, with a few big towns and a lot of small villages and some ruins to explore and different adventure sites and that kind of thing. But it was a relatively contained locale. And I think that's a very, very strong starting point for a campaign. So I'm trying to recreate that at sea. and that's the thing, at sea. So I can't just use geography to bound the players, and they may go beyond the boundaries. There aren't boundaries, but you know what I'm saying. They may go beyond this region very, very quickly. And if they do, then I'll follow them and we'll see where the adventures take us. But in the meantime, I've created this sort of opening sandbox for them to play in to show me what they're into and what hooks they're going to latch onto. And that should hopefully help me build the rest of the campaign based on their decisions using emergent storytelling and all of those things that you guys know that I like because I've told you that I like them a lot. So, anyway, that's what I've got for you today. Next week, it will be November 4th. And hopefully, that day, I will be dropping the first actual episode of Blades and Banners. We'll be meeting the new characters, meeting some of the new NPCs, and getting into the setting. And we'll see our players start to develop the world around them and go on their first little adventure. I'm really excited. This is going to be a really, really fun. I'm excited to see some feedback from you. I was telling the players it was really weird. I'd gotten kind of used to dropping an episode of Kyber Shards and getting feedback by seeing how you all reacted and watching the watch party and things like that. And it was weird to play the first session and then play the second session without having seen any audience feedback. So I think somebody asked in the big KSA if recording it had affected my play style. And apparently the answer is yes. I don't know what I said before, but apparently the answer is yes. Because while I don't know, I haven't tracked it enough to say how significantly I react to feedback. I'm definitely used to getting it. So that'll be nice to get back to sharing this story with you all because I really, really enjoyed sharing our story last time. So I'm excited to share this one with you, and I hope you're excited to see it. Until then, if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can find links to all of our social media and a whole bunch of other places down in the description below. The first episode of Blades and Banners drops Monday. And until then, thanks for rolling with us.